Hassan, who's going to give us a parent's perspective on the harm this bill will do. Senator Hassan. Thank you all, first of all, for being here. You have had a productive day in your classrooms, in your schools, and then you come all the way into Concord to make sure that we all speak up as citizens, as teachers, as parents, and on behalf of the next generation. So some of you know me as a former state senator. I live over in Exeter with my husband Tom and our two kids Ben and Meg. But the thing I want to talk to you about today blends a little bit of my experience as a state senator with my much more important experience as a mom. As I mentioned, I have two terrific kids, and some of you in this crowd have helped make them the terrific kids they are, because you're public school teachers. They're two very different kids. My son Ben is a wonderful 22-year-old young man who has cerebral palsy and as a result has severe disabilities. He's smart as a whip, but has almost no expressive communication. How do I know he's as smart as a whip? Because a really good teacher in the Exeter public school system figured it out. So, my husband and I always suspected that Ben was really smart because even as a little kid, he would laugh at pretty sophisticated humor. You know, he could hear everything going on around him. But here's what happened in 5th grade. His teacher came up to us at the first conference we had and said, so you know what happens whenever a kid in the class gets the answer wrong? I said, no. She said, your son laughs really hard. He's a real jokester, that Ben. And she said, and he's getting very subtle stuff very right. So she helped us develop a system. He can raise a hand for yes or no, and she started doing multiple choice testing with Ben with that hand raise. And lo and behold, he scored 90% on most testing. Right. Okay? Now, child number 2 is my so-called typical child. She's now 18. She actually worries me sometimes more than Ben does, because she's 18, and she's my daughter. But you all educated her too. And one of the things that I know about her and her friends in school, partly because of the role modeling all of you did, is they are my son's best translators. There's nothing they can't figure out about Ben. There's nothing that they can't help him do. Ben has attended community college classes. He socializes with people in the community. He lives a full and vibrant life because he's educated and because he knows he counts, as do all of you. Now, let me speak for a second. Let me put my state senator hat back on, because I served on finance, and I helped write the last budget. And I can't go through a day like today or listen to the news without correcting some of the misconceptions that people have about why we're where we are and what this budget fight is really about. Okay, so this morning there were a few folks from the Tea Party at our rally. Happy to report very peaceful interactions, very good rally earlier today. But they were holding signs saying we're here because the Democrats overspent the last 4 years. Wrong. Remember why we're here. We're here because in the fall of 2008, the bottom fell out of our economy after 8 years of trickle-down economics as supported by a Republican president and a Republican Congress. That's what happened here. And so what do Democrats have to do? Well, on the federal level, they pulled us away from the cliff. We didn't have a depression. Now, it's not easy to say to people who are hurting, it could have been worse, but it could have been a lot worse. On the state level, we saw a precipitous decline in revenues while need went up. And so we wrote a difficult budget. And a lot of you in this crowd, and a lot of my constituents, thought it was too harsh a budget. Because people were in need. People who had never been unemployed before were unemployed. They needed services. They needed help. And we did some difficult things. And I'll give you an example of one conversation. One of the things we did is we raised the rooms and meals tax over the course of the 2 years 1%. So I had a constituent call me and said, how could you even think of that? How could you even dare do that? And I said, look, let's be really clear. This is a 1% increase on a tax that is paid by people who are doing well enough to go out to dinner. Now, if you're going out to dinner and you're getting a $10 special at Applebee's, you're really telling me you can't afford an extra dime to help your friend and neighbor who's unemployed? You're really telling me that? That's some of the decisions we made. Now, this time round, we knew the budget would be worse this year. New Hampshire always runs, the last 20 years, New Hampshire has run a structural deficit. Structural deficits have pros and cons. The pro is that you always examine every program, every budget cycle, because you're going to have to readjust and cut and be lean as you can to make it work. The downside of a structural deficit is it's very hard to put money away to invest in the future and invest in long-term projects. But we've been running this is a New Hampshire issue and a New Hampshire problem through Democrats and Republicans alike. But we knew this budget would be tough because we knew some of the help from the federal government was going to go away, that it helped us plug the holes. We all knew that. Governor Lynch knows that, and he presented a really tough, really bare bones budget that a lot of people here and a lot of people from a variety of other groups have real trouble with. This budget in House Bill 2 is significantly smaller than that. They cut another $500 million, but they didn't do it because they needed to. They didn't do it because they needed to. They deliberately underestimated revenues. They proposed a cut in the rooms and meals tax, and they adjusted the business tax in ways that will cost the state treasury millions and millions of dollars. They did this so they could give tax cuts to people who right now can live with the taxes the way they are. I'm not saying it's easy to pay taxes, but I'm saying budgets are moral documents. Budgets reflect our priorities, and it is not right. It is not right to put people out of work and to deny our most vulnerable basic safety net. That's not right. And by the way, folks, some of the people here, I had people say, well, you know, you people here this morning aren't really from New Hampshire. So let's be really clear. Some of the people in Speaker O'Brien's Tea Party caucus weren't from New Hampshire till just very recently ago. They came here to promote a particular ideology, and it's our job to remind each other about what that ideology is really about. I'm going to read to you, I know it's cold, but this is a quote that I came across this week from the wonderful former governor of New York, Mario Cuomo.